Okay, so today we're diving into something pretty wild surrounding this movie. It ends with us.
Yeah, this whole thing is a mess.
It really
I
is.
mean, between Blake Lively's accusations and then all the different reactions that came out and then Candace Owens chiming
It's
in.
like every day there's a new twist or a new player enters the game.
Exactly. And I feel like the more we learn, the less clear the whole thing becomes.
So what we're going to do in this deep dive is really try to break down all the different claims and counterclaims, look at all the perspectives, and try to figure out, like, what are the key takeaways here? What's the truth, or at least what's closer to the truth?
Yeah, and I think a good starting point is to lay out Blake Lively's initial allegations, what she claims happened on set during the filming of this birthing scene with Justin Baldoni.
Right. So these allegations come from her CRD filing, which basically means a complaint filed with California's Civil Rights Department. And in sections 35 through 37, she basically says that on the day they were filming this birding scene, both Justin Baldoni and a Mr. Heath pressured her to be fully naked for the scene.
Wow, so right off the bat, that's a pretty serious accusation.
It is. And she claims that there was no prior agreement about any nudity.
Yeah.
Not in the script, not in her contract, not in any of the conversations leading up to the filming.
So it sounds like she felt pretty blindsided by this.
Yeah, and she goes on to say that Baldoni was really insistent on naked births, even using his own wife's experience as an example, saying that his wife tore off her clothes during labor and that it wasn't normal for women to stay in hospital gowns during childbirth.
So he was kind of using his personal experience to justify this creative decision.
Exactly. And Lively says she disagreed with him, but still felt pressured to agree to being naked from the chest down.
It makes you wonder about, the power dynamics on set and how much, say, actors really have when it comes to scenes like this.
Absolutely. And it really underscores the importance of clear communication and consent, especially when you're dealing with something as sensitive as nudity.
Right, you can't just spring something like that on someone at the last minute.
And she goes on to allege that the set itself was chaotic and crowded, and that it lacked what she considered standard protections for nudity, things that are supposed to be in place to ensure the safety and comfort of the actors.
Like what kind of protections?
So she specifically mentions the absence of an intimacy coordinator, which is someone who's trained to advocate for actors during these kinds of scenes. And she says there was no signed nudity writer, which is basically a document that spells out the specifics of any required nudity in a film.
Okay, so no one on set specifically tasked with ensuring her comfort and no formal agreement about what level of nudity was expected.
Right, and to make matters worse, she says the monitors weren't turned off, meaning that the scene was potentially viewable by anyone on set, even on their personal devices.
Yikes. It's not good.
It's not. And she claims that Baldoni didn't even close the set. So there were non-essential personnel just hanging around while she was in this vulnerable position.
Hold on, she was basically exposed in front of a bunch of people who didn't even need to be there.
That's what she's alleging. And she even names Mr. Sorowitz, the co-chairman of Wayfarer Studios, which was producing the film. She says he was there on set that day, which was apparently a rare occurrence.
Oh, so this wasn't just like a couple extra crew members. This was someone pretty high up.
Right, and she also claims she had to repeatedly ask for coverings between takes.
Wow, so basically she felt completely exposed and uncomfortable.
Yeah, and there's more. She was really bothered by the fact that Justin Baldoni cast his best friend in the role of the OBGYN.
Interesting. Why would that be a problem?
Well, she felt that this kind of smaller, intimate role would normally go to a local actor,
Mm-hmm.
someone who's just there to do their job and leave.
I see. So having Baldoni's friend in this role where he's up close and personal with her while she's practically naked made her feel even more uncomfortable.
Exactly. She felt like it was invasive and humiliating.
I can see how that would add another layer of discomfort to the whole situation.
And then there's this other incident that Lively recounts that's honestly pretty disturbing.
What happened?
So she says that this Mr. Heath approached her and her assistant on set and started playing a video on his phone.
Okay, and
Well, at first she thought it was pornography just based on what she saw on the screen.
oh no.
But then Mr. Heath explained that it was actually a video of his wife giving birth.
Oh my God, what?
Yeah, and when Lively asked if his wife knew he was showing this video around, he said that his wife wasn't weird about this stuff, basically implying that Lively was being unreasonable for being uncomfortable.
That's so inappropriate on so many levels.
It really is. It shows a complete lack of sensitivity and awareness of personal boundaries.
Okay, so we've got these very serious allegations from Blake Lively about feeling pressured into nudity, a chaotic set, lacking standard protections, and just a general lack of respect for her comfort and boundaries.
All right, and this is where things get really interesting because, as we mentioned, These claims have been disputed.
So there's another side to this story.
There is Candace Owens' commentary, brings in this guy, Brian Friedman, who's presenting what he calls facts that directly contradict Lively's narrative.
Facts, like what?
Well, for one thing, he claims that there's high-quality film footage of the birthing scene that tells a different story.
So basically he's saying there's evidence that backs up a different version of events.
Exactly. And this is where the complexities really come into play.
Hmm.
You know, who do you believe when you have these completely opposite accounts?
It's like trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces.
Right. So let's dive into the rebuttals, which are based on an amended complaint and a statement from Adam Mannon, the actor who played the OBGYN.
Okay, so what do they say?
Well, firstly, they deny that Steve Sarowich, the co-chairman of Wayfarer Studios, was present during the actual filming of the birthing scene.
Okay, so that contradicts Lively's claim that he was there.
Right. And then there's this big point of contention about whether or not Blake Lively was actually fully naked during the scene.
What do they say about that?
So the amended complaint states that she was wearing black briefs, a pregnancy suit that covered her midsection, and a hospital gown.
Okay, so they're saying she wasn't exposed the way she claims she was.
It's exactly. They argue that the original complaint's description of a small piece of nude fabric is misleading.
Well, that's a pretty big discrepancy.
It is, and it really changes the context of her claims about feeling exposed.
Right, if she was wearing all that, then it's not the same as being completely naked.
And the rebuttal goes on to say that Lively was actually involved in the writing and rewriting of the script, and that she specifically provided creative input for this birthing scene.
Hold on, so they're saying she had a say in how this scene was shot.
That's what they're claiming. And they also say that the film footage shows that the set wasn't chaotic at all. Just essential crew and talent were present.
So again, directly contradicting Lively's account.
Right. And they also deny the allegation that the film's financier was there watching her while she was supposedly undressed. They say he wasn't even on set during that scene, and that he only arrived later for a different scene where Lively was fully clothed.
So they're basically trying to paint a very different picture of what happened on set.
Exactly. And then there's Adam Mannon, the actor who played the OBGYN. And remember, Lively called him Baldoni's random friend.
Yeah, I remember that.
Well, his statement is pretty powerful. He comes across as a very credible guy. You know, he's a award-winning Shakespearean-trained actor with a Master of Fine Arts in acting from UCLA.
So not just some random guy off the street.
Not at all. He's got a serious acting background. He's toured nationally with a Tony Award-winning company. He even studied at Oxford's acting program on a full scholarship.
So he's the real deal.
Yeah, and in his statement, he says he won't speculate on Lively's motivations, but that his experience filming the scene was very different.
Meaning?
Well, he specifically states that Lively's costume included a full hospital gown, black shorts, and torso-covering prosthetics to simulate pregnancy.
Okay, so again, contradicting Lively's claims about being basically naked.
And he goes on to say that Lively never complained or expressed any discomfort to him at all during the filming, and that the whole thing felt completely professional.
So according to him, there were no red flags, no signs that Lively was feeling uncomfortable or pressured.
Right, and he also confirms that he was a local hire from New York and that he covered his own travel expenses, so there's no truth to the suggestion that he was flown in as a favor to Baldoni.
It's interesting how every detail in his statement seems to directly address a specific accusation made by Lively.
It does, right? And he ends by saying that he's willing to testify truthfully under oath about his experience.
So he's putting his reputation on the line.
He is, and it definitely lends a lot of weight to his words.
Okay, so I've got Lively's allegations, we've got the rebuttals from Friedman and Mannon, and now it looks like we're adding another layer to this whole thing with Harvey Weinstein.
Yeah, this is where things get really unexpected. Candace Owens says that Weinstein is feeling a sense of solidarity with Justin Baldoni.
Whoa, Harvey Weinstein, that's a name I didn't expect to hear in this conversation.
It's a curveball for sure, but apparently Weinstein sees some parallels between Baldoni's situation and what he went through.
In what way?
Well, according to Owens, Weinstein feels like the New York Times is doing to Baldoni what they did to him, selectively presenting information to fit a certain narrative.
It's interesting that he's drawing that comparison.
Right, and he specifically mentions Megan Twohey's reporting as part of this.
I see. So he feels like he was unfairly targeted by the media, and now he sees the same thing happening to Baldoni.
Exactly. Owen says Weinstein told a reporter that seeing Baldoni take legal action against the New York Times and its reporters really resonated with him because he felt like the Times did something similar to him.
What did they supposedly do?
Well, Weinstein claims they manipulated communications and ignored evidence that contradicted Lively's claims. He feels like they cherry-picked information to support their story while ignoring important context and facts.
So he's basically accusing them of biased reporting.
Right, and he even says that she regrets not fighting back harder at the time against what he perceived as a distortion of the truth.
It sounds like he feels like he was wronged by the media, and now he's speaking out in support of someone he sees as going through something similar.
That's the gist of it, and he says he's going to be following Baldoni's case closely because he believes it's relevant to anyone who's been the target of a media takedown, especially those who face legal consequences.
Wow, so he's really making a statement here.
He is, and it's definitely stirring the pot. And having someone like Harvey Weinstein weigh in on this.
It definitely adds another layer of complexity to an already complicated situation.
And of course, Candace Owens has her own take on all of this.
I'm sure she does. What does she say?
Well, she starts by saying that she firmly believes Weinstein abused his power and was unfaithful to his wife. She calls him immoral.
So she's not defending his past actions.
Not at all. But she also says that she believes he's currently in prison for something he didn't do, specifically consensual sexual relations.
Okay, so she's making a distinction between his past behavior and the specific charges he was convicted of.
Right. And she goes on to accuse the New York Times and other journalists of constructing the narrative of the Me Too movement and ignoring what she considers exculpatory evidence.
Like what kind of evidence?
Well, she mentions emails and the nature of some of Weinstein's long-term relationships.
So she's suggesting that there's more to the story than what was initially reported.
Exactly. And she makes this distinction between what she calls sugar babies and real victims.
That's a pretty loaded statement.
It is, and it's sure to be controversial. But her point is that she sees a similarity between Baldoni and Weinstein.
In what way?
She feels like both of them were targeted by the media and that the media swayed public opinion without presenting a complete and accurate picture.
So she's drawing a parallel between their experiences with the media, even though the allegations against them are very different.
Exactly. And Owens also provides some updates on Weinstein's legal situation.
Oh, right. He's been in the news recently.
Yeah, she mentions that his initial conviction in New York was overturned and that he has a new hearing coming up on April 15th.
Okay, so his legal battles are ongoing.
They are. And Owens also notes that Weinstein specifically thanked her and Joe Rogan for their public support.
Why them specifically?
Well, they've both been vocal about their belief that Weinstein was unfairly targeted.
I see. So he's acknowledging their support.
He is, and Owens even quotes Weinstein directly saying, "I want to take a moment to sincerely thank Candace Owens for believing in me and helping me reach millions of new supporters, and to Joe Rogan for amplifying that support even further. I'm going through a tough time right now, my health is not in a good place, and the road ahead looks challenging, but the outpouring of encouragement has truly lifted my spirits. I'm holding on to that hope, and I believe it's going to help carry me through."
Wow, that's a pretty powerful statement.
It is, and Owens goes on to express her concern that Weinstein might die in prison for something she doesn't believe he did.
So she's worried that he's going to face a grave injustice.
Exactly, and she even suggests that the situation with Baldoni could have escalated into criminal allegations.
Whoa, so she's saying that this could have been much worse for Baldoni.
That's what she's implying. And she really emphasizes the danger of media manipulation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, how it can shape public perception and potentially lead to serious consequences.
Okay, so let's take a step back and try to make sense of all this. We've got Blake Lively's initial allegations about what happened on set during the filming of this birthing scene.
Right, and then we have these very different accounts from Brian Friedman, Adam Mannon, and even Harvey Weinstein.
It's a lot to process.
It is, and it really highlights the importance of considering multiple perspectives. You know, we can't just take one person's word for it.
Especially when it comes to something as sensitive as this.
Exactly, and it makes you wonder about the role of the media. You know, how much power they have to shape public opinion.
It's a huge responsibility, and in this case, it seems like there's a lot of conflicting information out there.
There is, and it's up to each of us to decide what we believe.
Yeah.
But I think the takeaway here is that we need to be critical thinkers.
Yeah.
You know, we can't just accept everything we read or hear at face value.
We need to do our own research, look for corroborating evidence, and be open to the possibility that there might be more to the story than what's initially presented.
Absolutely, and I think this whole situation raises some important questions about truth and perception. You know, what does it really mean for something to be true when you have these conflicting accounts?
It's a philosophical question almost, but it's also a very real and practical issue when we're trying to make sense of complex situations like this.
Right, and then there's the question of power dynamics. You know, how do those play into these kinds of situations.
It's clear that there are power imbalances in Hollywood and in any industry, really, and it's important to be aware of how those imbalances can affect people's experiences and their ability to speak out.
And I think this case also highlights the importance of consent.
Mm,
Yeah, especially when it comes to something as sensitive as nudity.
absolutely. There needs to be clear communication and respect for everyone's boundaries.
And I think it's worth noting that this isn't just about Hollywood. These kinds of issues can happen anywhere.
In any workplace, any relationship, any situation where there are power dynamics at play.
So what can we do about it as individuals?
Well, I think awareness is key. We need to educate ourselves about these issues and be mindful of our own behavior and the dynamics in our own lives.
Right, and we need to be willing to speak up if we see something that's not right. Whether it's a friend, a colleague, or a complete stranger.
It's about creating a culture of respect and accountability.
And I think it's also important to be compassionate. We don't always know what other people are going through or what their motivations are.
It's easy to judge, but we need to try to understand and empathize.
Exactly. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I think the message is clear. We need to be critical thinkers. We need to be aware of power dynamics. We need to prioritize consent, and we need to be compassionate.
And most importantly, we need to keep having these conversations. These issues aren't going away anytime soon.
So let's keep talking, let's keep learning, and let's keep pushing for a more just and equitable world.
Absolutely. That's the only way forward.
All right, that's it for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us.
Until next time.
See ya.